Good afternoon, and welcome to the latest edition of the Christian Recorder Dialogues. I am your host, Chuck Hobbs. Many of you have watched the footage over the last few days out of Kenosha, Wisconsin. We recognize that Jacob Blake, a young man who is a grandson of AME ministers, cousin to AME ministers, was shot 7 times in the back up in Wisconsin by a law enforcement officer. He becomes just the latest hashtag, so to speak, of this year, where we have dealt with so many shootings, so many deaths, so many people who have been maimed based upon the reckless and or murderous acts of law enforcement officers. This afternoon, I have the pleasure of bringing to our readers and our listeners and our viewers, Reverend Jozlynne Williams, who is a pastor up in Kenosha, Wisconsin, who is going to talk to us a little bit about what is going on the ground up there right now, give us some background in regards to what the city is like, the demographics, and just talk to us in general about not just the Blake case, but what it is that the church should be doing to address police brutality here in the United States of America. So having said that, good afternoon, Pastor Jay.
All right. All that weight you just put on me. Thank you, Brother Chuck. Well, I have been pastoring in Kenosha since January of 2020, and we have hit the ground running with everything regarding COVID and Black Lives Matter. And now with this latest shooting, you know, it has been overwhelming. This is my first pastorate position within the AME Church, but Kenosha has a strong history of racial tensions, and it has escalated at this point. We are definitely moving forward. We are still being the church. Coleman Chapel has been in Kenosha for 88 years. They are the only AME church in that area, while there are other churches in Zion, Racine, Milwaukee area. They are the only one in Kenosha. And we have plenty of churches within the area, 50 to 60 churches, with a portion, mostly half being African-American congregations. Well, what we see today is that there's still racial divide. And the churches have been working together, all of the churches, to kind of come together in some way, because we recognize that there were issues, not just this year, not just everything with Black Lives Matter, but for the last 3 or 4 years under some other pastors, this church has worked to bridge that divide. And unfortunately, because of all of the events that have been happening over the time period, it has been making it very difficult for churches to unite. And to some degree, that is the truth. And in other ways, it's not. What we're finding is that many of our churches in the area are trying to be a part of whatever is happening in history and what changes are needed. And right now, what we really want to push out is voting. We really want to push out and make sure that young people under the age of 35 are registered and that they're actually voting. And we're not just wanting people to vote on this national level, to vote for Biden and vote for Harris or vote for whomever it is that you desire to vote for. But what we're hoping is that they will begin to vote on a local level, because we recognize that is where the biggest changes are needed, on the local level, so that we can have some political power, so that we can have some mainstays who understand what agendas, what we need in terms of for the culture, so to speak. Now, Coleman Chapel is always working. We are a part of activities. We've been in prayers and vigils since the very beginning. We've been active as a church. We continue to work and put forth before everyone what our goals are as a community, as a church, as Black persons living in America. And even though this may be small America, this is still a major city within the state of Wisconsin. They are the 3rd largest city in the state of Wisconsin. So even though it's not a big city like Chicago or whatever, but that's only an hour drive away, we know that many people have come from out of town to destroy and demolish the area. But we also see that you can't really point a finger as to who is a part of the destruction. As I was there on Tuesday evening, I and some parishioners, some members of the congregation, we rode around and we were able to see all the devastation. And unfortunately, most of it happened in an uptown, downtown area, which is considered to be where there's a food desert. And the one place where there was, I guess, a store, which was more like a convenience store, was burned. And unfortunately, that meant that people who went there for groceries, they won't have any place that's close by because other stores had already closed up in the area. They would have to travel at least 15 to 20 minutes by car in order to be able to get to another food place. And, convenience stores already have a higher price. So it's just a lot of issues. So right now there'll be a lot of food giveaways going on. And the area is very well known for having a lot of food pantries set up in different churches. Shalom Center partners with any church that they would need to and says, on this day, you can take this day, and people know that between a certain number of hours, they can come and they can pick up food. However, in that certain area where there's a large number of African Americans who live there, there is very little food resources.
And Pastor Jay, let me ask something. I want to backtrack on a comment that you made on the top of the hour. When you discuss Kenosha, and you have given a very vivid, detailed description of what it's like in regards to the demographics, what has the racial climate been like in that city, even before Jacob Blake was shot on Sunday? Is this an area that was just ripe for an explosion, so to speak, no pun intended? Or is this an area whereby, generally speaking, whites, blacks, Latinos, and other races tend to mix and get along well? What are your thoughts about that?
Now, that's so funny how you say that. I can't necessarily say or speak to the get along well. However, okay, I can say that the congregation that I serve is a mixed congregation. We have, third generation of people who are interracial. We also have people who, have decided to be with anyone of color or anyone of another color, I should say. And, it's free love inside of Coleman Chapel. Now, as it pertains to the rest of Kenosha, you can tell that it's like what you would see in many small cities. There is a racial mixture. And for some, it's wonderful, it's beautiful. And for others, I would think that they would speak against it. When riding around in certain areas, I noticed that there were barricades in residential areas, not necessarily in public spheres and public spaces. They were holding rifles. They were choosing to protect what was theirs. And you have to understand, it kind of sent a signal, something to me that said they're looking for a fight. I've been told by many of my parishioners who are in their early 50s, So, this is not too long ago that in school, while they were in high school, there was this tension that existed where they wanted segregation to be the way that the school systems went about. And it was always uncomfortable. So it is believed that there is an active white supremacy group that is in existence in the Kenosha land area, not necessarily openly, but to say maybe in the last 30 years that you could understand that, they were very much open, is definitely something that you can say. Right. It's a difficult place to make your mark. It's a difficult place to climb for people of color. At least this is what I believe and what I see.
And with respect to that, when you made another very great point about politics being local, and that's a cliche sometimes that people say, but I think that is so important And I'm always encouraging my readers and listeners to pay attention to down ballot races, particularly when you're talking about city commissions or councils, mayoral races, sheriff races. Things of that nature are so important because those are the individuals who will make decisions that impact issues just like this one, when a young man has been shot. From that perspective, are Black people in Kenosha pretty much within the power structure of the city? And if not, are other races that are or comprise the majority of the power structure, are they somewhat sympathetic to or sensitive to the issues that are so important to us right now about Black Lives Mattering?
Since I came to Kenosha in January, I will say this. I have been a part of a group, and I don't know how openly we are with saying who we are, but I can definitely express to you that this group is active. This group is very much aware of the political dynamics. They are understanding of who to shake hands with, who to trust. And I have been working very closely with some of the people who are in this group. And as you know, it can always consist of people who are small business owners, people who are faith-based leaders, people who are community organizers, and it's growing. It's growing more and more. And we continue to work with people who, yes, sympathize to what our concerns are, and who also want to see that change and really see that equality among all people, and understanding that we can all be better if we work together. If we continue to say us versus them, it means that the struggle is going to take a lot longer. Let's be honest. It doesn't mean that it won't come. We won't overcome, but it also means that we will have to work even harder. And right now, we're too intelligent of a people to work hard. We work smart. And so I'm very grateful for the connections that I've made with people of color, with clergy, with people who are outside of our denomination. We have to think bigger and broader in order to be able to succeed. It's not just a star or the light being shined on Coleman Chapel. It's a light and being shined on what the message is that we as, I guess, faith-based practices want to lift, which is love, which is kindness, which is being able to come together and recognize that we are one body, even though we have many parts.
Yes, ma'am. As you know, Dr. Martin Luther King once said in the late 1960s, not long before he was killed, that a riot is the language of the unheard. Understanding that and recognizing that there have been 3 or 4 nights of strong protests in Kenosha, some of which has turned violent. What are your thoughts in regards to that? Do you believe that those individuals, I think you stated earlier that the people who are doing the rioting and or causing the property damage are not natives to the city of Kenosha? Do you think that those few individuals who are causing the mayhem are actually diluting or taking away from the peaceful protests and the righteous cause of Black Lives Matter? Or do you believe it's a both and, in which peaceful protests are important, but somehow maybe the rioting and or the looting, while illegal, somehow does play a role in getting the attention of those who can make structural changes? What are your thoughts about that?
Brother Chuck, I think you hit the nail on the head. You know what you did. But I do believe that it is a both and. However, I also recognize that if these are outsiders or if these are insiders, one thing that has happened is that you destroyed an area where many African-American businesses, many small businesses existed. This is already a smaller city. So you have to understand the resources aren't necessarily limited, but it's not like a Chicago where you can destroy some buildings and, insurances are there. There were some Black businesses that were destroyed. There were some small businesses, some businesses that were owned by women that were destroyed, no matter what the color. And because of that, you have this issue where we have to really kind of look at what are we doing? What is the end game? And I keep saying, and I keep expressing that those persons who are a part of the rioting, the looting, they have an agenda. You have to understand they have an agenda. They have something in mind. It isn't that they want to just go in and destroy something. There is something that they want. There is an outcome that exists. However, we are not at that table. And just like we are not at the table for certain political agendas to go forward, we're not at this table, the one where destruction and breaking downs of systems, we're not at that table either. And so I say this, then we create our table, the table that says, these are our demands. These are the things that we're looking for. This is what we as people of color, this is what we as minority persons, minority businesses, this is what we are looking for. And when we can create that table and move in the actions and move in the ways that we've designed, we are lacking a plan. We are lacking being unified and coming together. And so many times during this, people have said, oh, we'll rebuild. We will rebuild. And I love the idea of rebuilding. However, if you are rebuilding what was there, if you are rebuilding what was in place before and it didn't work, why are you rebuilding?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
As I've expressed to certain people who I've been talking to, some like family members or whatnot, I have literally said, Kenosha is in a state of recovery. Just like Jacob Blake was fighting for his life, just like he's going to be fighting every day forward as long as he lives, he will be in recovery. And what we have to understand is Kenosha is also currently in a state of recovery. You have to recover from systemic racism. You have to recover from this looting, from this rioting. You have to recover from seeing a young man being shot 7 times in his back. You don't just get well. You get sick and you have to recover. And so until we can acknowledge that we are in a state of recovery and that we are in a period of recovery, there can be some concerns. It's going to be some delays. It's going to be things that are going to look like it's taking too long. And you have to understand, we just have to be patient and we have to continue to fight. I expressed to my students today that you can be anything that you want to be, but you can't do it if you're sitting down. And so I say the same thing to my church members. I say the same thing to anyone who would listen. What are you going to do? What is your plan? Are you concerned with your name being lifted up? Are you concerned with your name being in the lights and getting your name in the headlines? Because if that's what you're concerned with, right? We need some Baynard Rustins going on. We need some people who are on the underground, who are really knowing how to organize. And if there's somebody else who can come in, can work with and say, hey, this is the agenda. This is what we want to push forward. This is what we're working for. We can't grow tired. We can't grow weary in it. We need to keep moving. And what happens in a month from now, right?
Mm-hmm.
What happens 2 months, 3 months from now? Will we still be active? We did our moment in Black Lives Matter because of George Floyd, and yet were we still moving forward, or were we believing that we're going to get our justice? But until we continue to do the things locally that we're supposed to do locally, right, we won't get the answers that we need. So to say this, as it pertains to those who are rioting and those who are looting, I do believe it is a language of those who are unheard. But I also believe that there are some anarchists who are very much infiltrating the movement. They have their own agenda. And does it separate from what we are doing? Only for the ignorant. Only for those who would group everyone together. Only for those who would say that Black Lives Matter is no longer a legitimate movement. That's incorrect. Just because someone is trying to co-opt, just because someone is trying to infiltrate and take over a movement, we know that this movement was strong. We know that this movement had several heads that were taken and cut off and murdered over years. And so because of that, Black Lives Matter is also in a state of recovery, so that it can rebuild, because it was a very strong movement and it still is a very strong movement. It cannot be co-opted. because at the end of the day, the message still stands.
Amen.
All lives cannot matter until Black lives matter.
You are absolutely correct. And, as I was listening to you talk, one thing that I often, again, write about and talk about is that if you look back through history, the Black church, the AME denomination, has always been at the vanguard of systemic change, whether it was the abolitionist movement, whether it was the civil rights movement. The church has always played a role in pushing the agenda forward with respect to Black civil rights and Black lives mattering. Having said that, I really liked how you pointed out the Bayard Rustin piece in terms of the organization. And I also like how you're talking about the infiltration, because as you know, and I was a history major back in the day at Morehouse College and at Florida A&M University grad school. So yeah, right. So history is my deal. And one of the things that is interesting is you remember the whole COINTELPRO issue where J. Edgar Hoover was specifically sending out minions to infiltrate all of the Black civil rights organizations to try to foment discord behind the scenes and frustrate the purposes that they were founded for. Probably no better, right, example of that was with the Black Panthers, a group that was founded for the specific purpose of making sure that Blacks were protected from specific violence by law enforcement. And in the process, that group also was uplifting the community, making sure that people were fed, as you were talking about at the top of the hour, making sure that education was taken care of. And yet the United States government was specifically focused upon trying to disrupt those peaceful aims that they were doing. Understanding that, over the last 7 years, it has been amazing to me that since I first saw the hashtag Black Lives Matter right after Trayvon Martin was, not just after he was killed, but after George Zimmerman was acquitted for killing Trayvon Martin, what has been interesting to me is I have seen Black Lives Matter go from just a slogan to then being a movement that was somewhat considered on the fringes or the margins by the quote unquote powers that be, to now it is in the mainstream. If you think about 4 years ago, even, and thanks to Facebook memory, I'm able to see some of my posts from 2016. When Colin Kaepernick was out protesting and kneeling just in 2016, Black Lives Matter was still considered somewhat on the fringes of both then Democratic candidate Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump. Now, at the same time, you have a Democratic convention last week where Joe Biden was talking about Black civil rights and Black Lives Matter right out the gate. And so understanding that, do you believe that there is anything, what can we do more to help those white brothers and sisters of ours who are on the fence about it? Because I see a lot of ignorance. I see a lot of misinformation where it's like, Black Lives Matter is Marxist. Black Lives Matter is Antifa. What can we do to make people understand that, again, all that we want to do is have the police stop killing Black people who are unarmed for no reason? What are your thoughts about that?
That is a very meaty question. I will say this, as it pertains to working with people who are outside a system. I've always welcomed people who want to work with us. And I have to say it like this, to work for us. You have to understand, this is not an invitation to come and take over. You are invited, you are welcomed, but many lack the understanding, lack empathy, and have not had the experiences. And many of us, dare we say, lack that as well. There are many African Americans, especially within the AME Church, who are very elite, well educated, understand the systems very well, and yet, due to climbing up, if we could dare say it, affirmative action, if we dare say it, working off the backs of moms and dads who cleaned other folks' homes, we are in a place and in a state where we don't really understand what's happening. So it would behoove us to be able to connect with a younger generation. And I say that not yet even being 40, connecting to a younger generation to understand what it is that are their needs, what it is that they're looking for, what changes that they need. And sometimes they cannot even vocalize that. And because they are unable to vocalize that, we who have our degrees and are able to quote history as we do, it is our job then to be able to be their voice. And so I say that to say, if we are to connect ourselves with others, we have to recognize that others are not just our white brothers and our sisters. Others are those who are marginalized. Others are those who are uneducated. Those are the others who are differently abled. We have to be able to understand the messages. Again, creating our own agenda. We are hoping that this movement will make things better for the current generation. I've had my time. Now I'm at a different place where I am working to cultivate the now generation, to make them think differently about themselves, to make them think, to make them know that, no, you don't have to go to college. You can do anything that you want to do. And so when we talk about Black Lives Mattering, we have to meet people where they currently are. And if we cannot meet them where they are, and instead, are forcing them to rise to a different level or rise to our level, we are not doing the real work of Black Lives Mattering.
Amen. And Pastor Jay, let me ask you another question. I know we're coming up close to the end of our talk, and it's been a wonderful talk. I know that we were supposed to also have your brother clergy, Reverend Stephen Green, who is doing some work on the Breonna Taylor case in Kentucky right now, but I know that he is tied up this morning working specifically on that case. So with that, I want to finish up with a few things with you that I also was going to talk about with him. Defund the police. That is a slogan that we're reading a lot. I had a talk with Representative Jim Clyburn the other day, and he made some points where he understood the crux of what the defund the police movement means, but he feels as if the messaging or the title in and of itself could be problematic. I have always taken defund the police to mean reform the police. I've never necessarily believed that we shouldn't have police, but I also believe that there are ways that police need to be reformed. And if not, it's specifically with respect to qualified immunity, being able to take that away so that officers who do shoot someone and happen to kill someone can be sued in civil court for their acts. But when you talk about defund the police or police reform, as a young woman, as a pastor, what would you like to see, or how should police reform be enacted in this country? What are some things you would like to see law enforcement do differently than what they are doing right now?
I really don't like the term defund the police. I am very much in agreement with you. And I have to speak candidly and be very transparent. Hearing this information is something that I'm still kind of in a torn between place. There's a pastor in Waukegan, Reverend Janice Brazil Cummings, and she has written a great letter to different organizations. And I really wish I had the time and I was aware, and I would pull it up for you. She's at Trinity AME Waukegan, and she is definitely on the forefront of understanding what reform would look like for police. And that which I have read expressed that every officer should be wearing a body cam. Every officer should be trained in some kind of way as what are best practices to take down someone who you plan to arrest, or what is something that needs to be in place that solidifies what is an arrest. Being able to have some type of mediation talks, being able to come in and really look at the situation and kind of determine it. When you look at the Army, you look at different places where people join. There's a psychological test that you have to take. Even becoming an AME pastor, you have to take a psychological test. You have to go in and be treated and find out, oh, is this person crazy? Is this person, have a sound mind? And I feel that in many ways, something is missing in those beginning stages of looking at the character of some of our officers. I mean, you already understand that this is someone who is brave and strong, and yet we can also see the opposite. Someone who is scared, someone who has a complex about themselves as they enter into a system, someone who is looking for power. And so in many ways, you can say that it's going to be a corrupt system, because you're going to have both and peoples coming into this different institution. And you're going to find those officers who maybe should not have been admitted, those who didn't necessarily pass the psychological test, but they could shoot straight. They were strong, they were tall, they were handsome, they were the right color, they were second and third generations of officers, and yet they should not be there. I think that the police system needs to look very closely as to who they're hiring. Are these people coming in to protect and serve, or are they just coming in to shoot and kill?
Right. And, the last question that I want to pose to you is, one of the things that I have noticed over the last 2 weeks, as we've gone from the Democratic convention to the Republican convention, is that crime and punishment, they have been discussed about, but they have been talked about in vastly different terms depending on who the speaker might be. Yeah. And yet I also understand that we cannot predict the outcome of the November election. I know that we are encouraging our viewers to participate in the voting process, but as it stands today, we don't know whether Joe Biden will win in November or whether Donald Trump will be the victor come November. Having said that, regardless of who wins the election come this November, do you think it's important for the Black Lives Matter movement to engage both political parties to make sure that the issues that we have talked about this afternoon stay on the forefront moving forward?
Black Lives Matter is its own political movement. We need to engage ourselves. Democratic, Republican, it doesn't matter. Green Party, independents, we need to engage ourselves. We need to realize what it is that we're looking for, what utopia we're trying to reach, what is our paradise, so to speak, what helps us to know that we've achieved our goal. Unless we know what that looks like, and we can't just say equality for all, because that's just not society. We know that there are the haves and the have-nots. But what does it look like? It means having access, of course. But there are some people who are going to partake of it, are going to recognize that this resource is available to me, and they're going to take advantage of it. And there will be people who won't take advantage of it for a variety of reasons, saying they don't want a handout. They very well may feel like it may come with, some type of connections that we will say that you owe us. And so if we engage Democrats, if we engage Republicans, we have to engage people who care, because we know that in both parties, there are people who care about the agenda we will lift, and there will be people who won't care about it because their constituents won't make up a majority of us. Their constituents won't be able to provide anything specific to us that helps us to understand that our needs need to be met. And what would it do for them? And if that's how we're going to do things, if we're operating off of what we can do for someone else, it will be very difficult. What we need to do is just engage people on a human level. And as soon as we are able to meet people, and again, if we can't, we are putting them in place. There are so many of us who have unscathed reputations, who are very qualified to run for office. How does Stacey Abrams get to where she is? Because she had people who believed in her. She had people who she could speak to and people who she could reach. And there are so many of us out here who can do the same thing. And as long as we keep pushing forward, it doesn't matter if we run for Democrat, it doesn't matter if we run under Republican, as long as we push forward what makes sense, what is equal, what is right, and what is really out of love. We can keep going. It doesn't matter the party.
Absolutely. And with that in mind, moving forward this week and in the next week, number one, we want to thank you for all that you are doing to lead on this issue and trying to help foment safety and change in Kenosha. What is it that our viewers can do to help you and your church family moving forward in the weeks ahead? Because as we can tell from George Floyd to Rayshard Brooks to all of the hashtags across the country, this year has been a very sustained, the movement has been very sustained. It has not waned at all. And so the next few weeks might be pivotal up in your city as well. Is there anything that our viewers can do to assist you toward those ends?
Right now, we are definitely always asking for prayers, prayers that the land will be healed, that the people will be healed, that we will all recover. Right now, we are accepting water. We will be out walking this weekend with the Blake family. And we ourselves as a Coleman Chapel Church on the weekend of September 12th, that Saturday, what we hope and plan to do is have our own prayer visual along with voter registration. If it needs be, we will also be giving out food for individuals. And we're just looking to connect with as many Black churches as possible. If you're not in the local land area, if you're not able to give in that aspect, to be able to be a physical body, you can always donate financially, which can always be a blessing at our Cash App, which is $CCAME Kenosha, one word, CCAME Kenosha. And what we'll be doing is using those monies to provide as much resources to the families, because there were some families who were burned out, who lived above those storefronts, who lived in certain areas. And again, being able to provide benevolence as much as we possibly can. I can't tell you, at least once a week, once every Sunday, I get people who are coming in who are in need of assistance. And the resources are available. But when the church is lacking certain resources because of membership, because of COVID-19, it makes it very difficult to continue to do ministry. And so we are always working forward and always moving forward and trusting that God will help us during this time, because there is no limit to what God can do.
Amen. And on that, Pastor Jay, we thank you for all that you do. And our prayers are with you as well as the body of your church moving forward in the days ahead. And we actually look forward to speaking to you some more in the days and weeks ahead as we continue to push forward on this very important agenda. So thank you so much for coming and spending a few moments with us today to talk about the work that you are doing.
Not a problem. Thank you so much, Brother Hobbs. And thank you, Christian Recorder, for having me this evening.
Very good.
Afternoon.
All right. All right. And I'd also like to thank our viewers. And as I talked about yesterday, because of the COVID-19 pandemic and social distancing, we also are dealing with budget cuts, as many corporations and churches across the country are. So to that end, if you enjoy what you are reading and or seeing with the Christian Recorder, we respectfully ask that you contribute to the work that we are doing. And the ways that you can is you can contribute via Cash App, which is $AME Church School. That's $AME Church School. You can also call our headquarters with a credit card, which is 615-601-0450. Again, that is 615-601-0450. Or you can mail in a donation to 1722 Scovel Street. That's SCOV as in Victor, EL Street. And that's Nashville, Tennessee, 37208. And again, as always, I want to give a shout out to my editor for the Christian Recorder, John Thomas, as well as AME Publishing, Reverend Roderick Beelan. I also thank Kirtiana Freeland, who is one of the best producers that we have, and also our graphics editor, Corwin Davis, for the work that they do in making sure that our programs look good, sound good, and that we do the best that we can to keep our viewers and listeners apprised of what's happening. I also have to get a shout out to my partner, Gerald Tooks, who on my end here in Tallahassee, Florida, is doing his part to make sure that I come as strong as I can each day and look all right while doing it. And I hope I do. And I hope I sound good. And I hope that you are appreciating what it is that we are doing to raise awareness of all of the things that our church is doing across the United States of America to continue to push forward on politics, social issues, and all of the things that will help improve the quality of life for all Americans in this nation. Thank you so much for participating. We look forward to talking to you the next time on the TCR Dialogues. Have a good afternoon.
My sisters and brothers, as we look back through the pages of history, one of the things that we will discover is 1787 was a very good year. The African Methodist Episcopal Church was born. 223 years later, I've learned that only a few things never lose their importance. One is voting. Our power is at the voting box. November the 3rd is Election Day. I urge the 12th Episcopal District, home of the Little Rock Nine, to join with the AME Church in the work of the AME V Alert by using the toolkit found at www.amev-alert.org. You will have a step-by-step guide to ensure that your vote counts. Let's get every voter to vote in 2020. I'm Bishop Michael Mitchell, presiding bishop of the 12th Episcopal District, comprising the state of Arkansas and Oklahoma, and also serving as the president of the Council of Bishops, and I approve of this message.
Thank you. God bless and have a wonderful afternoon.